I'm able to hear you. Can you hear me? Okay, okay. Yes, sir. Okay, sir. Thank you. Welcome to the disaster mitigation and management class. Good morning, all of you. As we have discussed in the previous class, we are close to the previous class at biological disasters. Today, let us discuss about biological disasters. In this category, as we are going through some classification of the biological disasters, in this we are having three types of biological disasters have been classified. One is epidemics, second one is pest attacks, and the third one is forest fire. So actually this so-called forest fire is also classified in natural disasters as well as pest attacks also. But by means of the nature, we are going to classify in biological disasters. When we are dealing with epidemics, as of we know, in the current scenario, when we are dealing with coronavirus also, this is also one of the pandemic, right? So the epidemics, what is the difference between epidemic and a pandemic? The difference between these two are explained by means of its reaching out international borders. That means if it is worldwide, the people who are the communities or societies which are being affected globally, that will be called as a pandemic. And if it is limited to certain area or certain communities or certain region, then those will be called as epidemics. So in the current scenario, when we are dealing with pandemics, COVID-19 is one of the greatest disaster that we can classify this particular disaster as a biological disasters. So entire world, wherever, whatever the country and whatever the borders are being established, and it has been crossed the borders and it reached the almost entire world communities, and it has affected thousands of millions of lives have been in danger. So in this scenario, when you come to the different what we can say symptoms of this so-called current pandemic, that you can look at the diagram. So therefore, while coming to the fever and fatigue, sore throat, muscle pain, dry cough, shortness of breathing, and you can see the percentages. It is not only that only getting fever is going to give you corona symptoms. It is not only by means of a body pains you are going to get treated for COVID. So if you are having these many symptoms at these percentages, then we can say that the symptoms are being recognized as a COVID-19. So, especially what are the major effects that we are going to take place due to this is it is going to infect the lungs and it will become very difficult to breathe. So if we are not having oxygen levels properly, the body is going to be shut down. So here the so-called virus, whatever the virus that have been created, this so-called virus, the moment enters into the human organ, it is going to be spread over the entire lungs and it is going to stop the breathing. By means of that, it leads to death. So if the proper treatment is not being served, then obviously loss of life is going to take place. With this COVID-19 disaster, you can, according to the COVID-19 disasters, as we know that each and every country suffered a lot and they have lost several lives, thousands of lives have been taken away. And still it is continuing and without any proper precautions or without any proper guidelines from the authorities, if we are going to continue the mass movement, public movement, then obviously there is a chances of increasing the effect of the COVID-19 disaster. While coming to the pest attacks, when we are dealing with the pest attacks, the recently also in 2020 we have experienced even Telangana, Uttar Pradesh, Kerala. These all states have been experienced pest attacks also. So, what is this pest attack in a sense? Those so-called huge number, like mass numbers in billions, millions or billions, these pests will come together and they will attack the crops and they will destroy the crops and which is going to lead to the crop failure. So if this continues for a larger areas, then what happens is due to the crop failure, the seasonally, the shortage of food will takes place. So this will also be considered as a one of the biological disasters. Now, when we are dealing with pests, different pests are we can observe in this. So, for different each and every type of pest, it is going to implement or it is going to generate millions and billions of its group, and they are going to attack over possible over a possible crops and they are going to be destroyed. And if you look at this, the way these are going to nullify the crop by means of eating the whatever the whether it may be leaves or fruits or vegetables or whatever it may be, they are going to be eaten away. So this is you can see this. So such type of disasters, this will also be called as a this can be categorized as a natural disaster, but it is being classified in our biological disasters. And fire is also one of the most important, which we have already discussed, right? So let us come to the technological disasters. In these technological disasters, we can classify chemical disasters, industrial disasters, nuclear disasters, and radiological disasters. So almost whatever the chemicals that are being manufactured, and if the leakage occurs, and that is also comes under industrial, but the classification technological disasters have been taken place in these four ways. when we are dealing with chemical disasters, the chemical, whatever, whenever, for suppose say, if any of the manufacturing unit or any of the chemical industry, if it is leaking any leak happens, then what happens? Obviously, the corresponding chemicals will blow into the air, and the surroundings areas wherever according to the wind path, they will travel and they will be deposited at the nearest possible areas. So what happens, depending upon the type of the chemical, depending upon the effects of the chemical which is going to be produced, the communities, nearest communities will suffer. Some of them will be, some types of some types of chemicals will yield you in skin diseases, and some types of chemicals will yield you organ failures and organically affected, like that. And some chemicals will leads to soil erosion, and some chemicals will leads to crop failures, and some, there are different types of chemicals. So depending upon that, the effects will be considered. And now when you are dealing with industrials, almost every industry, whatever the industry is there, it is going to emit some what we can say gases after the manufacturing of any products. The so-called gases, waste gases which are being released into the atmosphere, they are going to cause the most what we can say, they will cause climatic pollution, air pollution, and they will lead to affect people or communities near the industries. So that is why some tanning industries or some any other manufacturing industries which are being timed with specific time zones, which when they are going to start their manufacturing. So to minimize the effects of those gases in the surrounding communities, probably so-called industries are proposed very far away from the urban areas or rural areas, in the living areas, residential areas. So such type of industries are not entitled in regular residential areas. And while coming to the nuclear disaster, this, as much as we know, nuclear disaster, as the nuclear bomb explodes, then what happens? Obviously, due to the chain reaction, the heat will, the energy, so-called energy that has been released due to the fusion, it takes place, it generates extreme heat signatures, and that so-called heat can be continued and increased furtherly by means of its chain reaction. So due to this, what happens, up to certain radius, whatever the life of communities or life of wildlife, any creature around that, some particular up to particular radius, they will lead to lose their lives. That
The
means,
PPT is being structured.
ma,
PPT is being structured.
okay, yeah, due to leakage of chemicals, you can see whenever some accident occurs within the, whether it may be nuclear plants or chemical industries, anywhere. So at that times also, these type of disasters will takes place, and most probably when accidents occurs, this type of technological disasters will takes place. And while coming to the radiological, So when we are dealing with the radiological disaster, these the causes of radiological disasters mostly by means of missile industries and by means of some chemical attacks, and whenever they are being released, and the exposure of any human body to the radioactive elements, so that will leads to organic failure in the human bodies. So those will be at extreme heat conditions, extreme heat signatures, and these will be, if treated properly, there might be chances of a survival. But majority of the, when radioactive elements, they have humans are being exposed to the radioactive elements, then generally the death will be very near, as the heat of the body will increase and organs function will be decreased. So whenever any such type of radioactive elements are being released in the atmosphere, and the surrounding communities should be taken care of medically in a proper manner. While coming to the man-made disasters, in the man-made disasters, it's been classified as buildings, rural and urban fires, radio and road, rail and airplane accidents. Radiological already we discussed, chemical, nuclear already we discussed. So in these all are classified as a man-made disasters. In the initially when we are discussing about natural disasters and man-made disasters, and again here we are going to classify these in man-made disasters. Let us come to the building collapse. What is a building collapse? When a building is being constructed, there are several reasons for the failure of a building. What could be the reasons? The reasons could be any due to structural design fault. That could be one reason. Another reason, due to the settlement of a soil, that means consolidation of the soil beneath the foundation, that leads to collapse. And another one, if any of these impact loads that act over a structure and which is being not designed during the considered in the during the design, that will also leads to collapse of a structure. So on a whole, when a building is being designed, the parameters whatever associated with the building construction, that means that we need to consider codal provisions. If a designer follows the codal provisions and executed the design according to the requirement and depending upon the soil, especially here, any construction that requires a sophisticated soil report, depending upon that only the design of any structure can be made. Otherwise, the probability of failure will take place due to incompatibility of soil conditions. So if you are not having soil conditions or soil properties ready-made, what we can say tested, then obviously there will not be any scope for having a good design. So in any general building failures, this is the most important criteria, whether it may be designed for lesser load carrying capacity, or it is due to soil failure, or due to extra impact. So these reasons will lead to collapse of the building. That is why if an engineer makes a mistake, there will be several loss of lives will be possible. But if a doctor makes a mistake, one patient can die. But if an engineer makes a mistake, it leads to, whether it may be hundreds or thousands, people will lose their lives. So when we are designing, we need to consider all these parameters. Well, coming to the fire, as we discussed already, fire, and especially in rural areas and urban areas. Okay, so when we are dealing with urban areas, it is very vulnerable rather than rural area. Why? Because in urban areas, some of the constructions which we can see in our area itself, in Hyderabad itself. So what happens? There will not be emergency exists. Due to that reason, there are several loss of life due to fire accidents. So this leads to the prior permission from the authorities. Without prior permissions, if we construct structures, definitely it is going to lead very bad damage to the community. So when we are dealing with any sort of accidents in construction industries, those are beyond the regulations of the authorities. So if we follow the regularities of the authority, there is a possibility of minimizing the loss of property and loss of lives considerably. When we are dealing with accidents, always it's we used to hear, or we used to see in news or somewhere, the accident. These are completely human being fault, and these also will lead to at a greater rate of death rate. If you look at in road safety, annually, almost in each and every country will have a record of number of accidents occurred, number of lives taken, lives lost, and property damage. There is a survey, and they used to record each and every accident, and they will analyze the accident, and they will try to provide guidelines depending upon the those conditions. So at certain times, that is about a road accidents. While coming to the rail accidents, sometimes rail accidents will take place due to technical issues, sometimes due to weather conditions, sometimes due to floods, and these are these so-called transportation will be hit by the natural disasters. Then obviously the failure of a transportation will take place. It might lead to several loss of lives, and which is a completely man-made disaster. So such type of disasters can be treated, and we used to observe very rare sometimes. So when we come to the air crashes, so in aeroplane, the mode of transportation, aeroplane, if you consider this, every year we used to what we can say, we used to hear plane crashes, or plane crashed into the sea, plane crashed in a runway.
9/11, sir.
Yes. So there will be the reasons for such type of accidents might be due to technical, might be due to weather conditions, sometimes what we can say failures of engines, and sometimes due to natural effect, natural disaster. That means the lightnings or thunders will leads to failure of the transportation. So while coming to the global trends in a disaster, what is a global trend? The global trend is nothing but a change in situation that affects many countries of the world. That is nothing but a global trend. While coming to the global trends in disaster, it is a very much sophisticatedly say it is dependent upon the data and statistics. So initially, we need to understand and study the data and statistics and the impacts and costs of disasters. So if we are able to analyze, and a systematic disaster data collection and analysis can be used to inform policy decisions to the authorities. Otherwise, without having a proper knowledge of these analysis, we are not going to suggest or recommend decisions to the authorities. Okay, if you look at it globally, there are so several organizations, as we discussed in the previous class also, several organizations. For suppose say UNISR, SDR. So it is nothing but a United Nations International Strategy for Disaster Reduction. So in this particular organization, what they do, they will record each and every disaster and effects, and they will collect entire data pertaining to any of the disaster which occurs. And these organizations will have previous history data and as well as upcoming disasters warning centers, and significantly when you observe a particular United Nations international strategy, it has been a possibly in the recent years, the disasters have been increased. So population growth will also one of the impact factor for such type of disasters. So especially when we are looking at developing countries, so the developing countries will be very vulnerable due to the low coping capacity. So what we can say that, why? Because due to the scope when we are dealing with development, so the coping capacity will be always very low due to their conditions of development. So this is also one of the most impacting factor while, while comparatively with the others. When coming to the earthquake events, in the past few decades, if you observe, the increase in the earthquakes are not that much considerable. So obviously, when we're dealing with the past scenario, the number of earthquakes that are going to occur annually, they are stably good. While coming to the floods and windstorms, these are observed as increased from decade to decade. So this may be major reason for such type of disasters increase will be nothing but environmental changes. What is environmental changes here? That means the climate change. So the climate change, most probably we can first strike the only one problem we will call it as a global warming. So this so-called global warming is leading to several natural disasters, and in such a manner, if you consider, the possibility of occurring disasters are more than previous. And while coming to the people living along the coast, that is also one of the vulnerability to the disasters, and increasing coastal population causes increased risk from hurricanes. That is a very well known fact. And while coming to the uh, floods, that is also one of the most important factor we need to be considered. Well, coming to the climate change, what is the climate change? As we are speaking about climate change, the environment which is going to increase its or change its regular climatic conditions. So in this scenario, the global warming, as we consider, the global warming and its effects are bound to last many years if you consider. So it requires climate change adoption. What is a climate change adoption? It is just nothing but a response to global warming in order to reduce the vulnerability of social and biological systems to relatively sudden change and thus offset the effects of a global warming. So in this particular scenario, the climatic change adoption is most important. If you look at this, as we are looking at the diagram picture. So due to the extreme heat conditions, the ice has been melted into water. So whenever we are looking at the climate, we can see possible changes very intensively, and which is going to give you a very bad results for the next generations when we compare. So while coming to the adaptivity capacity, so what we are going to observe in this, it consists of mostly contribution of each and every community towards to develop what we can call it as a to develop climate change programs. So improvement of climate change programs and serving the communities to increase the plantation or facilities and to minimize the global warming. So such programs are mostly required and invited by means of climate change adaptivity. So in this, whenever you deal with the response to the climate change, that is nothing but we can call it as a climate mitigation, which leads to reduction of greenhouse gases emission. So in here, when you deal with some examples of climate change adoptions, in this initially prioritizing adoptions efforts in communities that have highest vulnerability, and second point is predicting climate change related trends based on assessment of current risk, vulnerability and climate variability. And while coming to the integrated long-term sustainable development and poverty reduction strategies, this will also be considered in climate change adoption. Strengthening the existing capacities, and another point which we can deal is developing robust mobilization mechanisms and ensure financial and technical support to local disaster management officials. In such a manner only, it is possible to reduce the disaster risks and arrange improved and tested early warning systems, contingency plans, along with the integrated response to ensure effect, community-based adoption and risk reduction. This is the one of the most important point. Early warning systems are most effective, effectively take its role to minimize the disaster risk. While coming to the disaster risk reduction and climate change adoption cannot manage as individual events. They are combinedly, they are interlinked with each other. So when you are dealing with disaster risk reduction, and that is also nothing but a climate change adoption. So they are being interlinked. The community should be aware of relevant risks that should be quantifiable. So that means it requires awareness. The community should require awareness. So in this, if we are not able to provide a proper warning systems and along with that proper awareness programs, obviously the communities will not going to recognize the ways of saving their lives during the disasters. So that is the one of the reason. While coming to the urban disasters, when we are dealing with urban disasters, what is an urban disaster? This so-called urban disaster is simplified as a urban cities, raising of cities. That means when you are dealing with a large population density, that is called urbanization. So generally, we expect less than 50% of the population will be in urbans, and greater than 50% of the population will be in villages, in rural areas. So urban disaster occurs mainly due to urbanization. That is the only reason. So this urbanization will have several reasons to increase. What are those reasons? One is due to the services whichever we are having within the city limits and within the rural limits, the services will be different. That means the accessibility, the power supply, the communication system, and the water supply system, this all will be very effective in urbanization. But whereas when you compare with the rural areas, the power supply may not be that much adequate, and the water supply will also may not be adequate. And not only that, due to the uh, failure, that means due to the failure of crops or the people who are cultivating in agriculture fields, what happening is there due to the lack of proper income. That means when when cultivation takes place, obviously when the crop has been yielded, they are going to sell the crop and they are going to get the profit, right? But here in nowadays, what is the major scenario is on cultivation, the farmers are not getting proper profit, even though this is the main reason why the villages or rural area people are going to come to the cities to feed themselves and food to feed their families by means of doing any sort of job. So this reason is leading to the creation of slums in urban areas. So generally, in the previous past history, if you go back to 1 2 decades before, only 30% of the population used to reside within the cities, but now it went to up to 50%. So sometimes it is estimated till to 2050, 2050, it is expected that 67% of people world people is live might be expected to live in cities in very near future. So in here, what are the problems that occur due to urbanization? It's a very simple task. When you are dealing with urbanization, what happens if the capacity of water supply is limited to certain people, then within that area, again, if you are having additional people, then you have to supply to them also, right? So for them, it will become a very difficult task to supply. So the resources, whatever the government or authorities are supplying, it will become difficult for the authorities also, and as well as the sewerage systems, and as well as living residential systems. They will be supposed to be lived in a congested form. That is the main reason for the urbanization disasters. So if anything happens, for suppose in this pandemic situation scenario, if you consider in slum areas, there is a possibility of spreading of this COVID very much easily. Why? Because the space, the privacy between the people is very less. That is one of the major reason why the so-called spread will be very easy in slum areas. And not only that, the drainage systems will be having a what we can say, it is difficult to provide a proper drainage system in those areas. And there are several problems we can raise in these urban areas. In this, based on damage, whatever that causes in urban disasters, they are classified into two categories. One is urbanizing natural disaster, and another one is pseudo-urban natural disaster. So, in urbanization natural disaster, it is seen mostly in the developing world where sustainable natural environment is not affected by human activities. It mainly occurs when residential areas and urban infrastructure are developed in rural areas. While coming to the pseudo-urban natural disasters, these are the disasters where there is a little or no damage to the human life, whereas urban infrastructure and lifeline systems are completely destroyed. In such type of disasters, population density is not large and not only large, and the property damage will also can be prevalent. In this scenario, when you go deal with urbanization, you can look at the diagram. So the living standards will be decreased. So these so-called living standards, that means the density of the living population will increase. As far as we are having in a society of vertical living, the density is higher. Even though when you compare with slum areas, the density will be much higher than the in a normal regular vertical living. So when we are dealing with such type of disasters, the effects that are going to take place due to this so-called slums or urbanization will be very severe at certain times. In especially in times of epidemics, it will be very much vulnerable to the all the epidemics. When we are dealing with the transportation also, transportation also will become very questionable due to this urbanization. Obviously, in often in our recent recent festivals from AP to Telangana, Telangana to AP, if you look at that, the people who travels weekly or often for the festivals, the transportation is one of the most important criteria. If you look at bus transportation, if you look at train transportation, you are definitely going to be amazed how much strength of the traveling is going to take place. That is why, especially in Hyderabad, the urbanization is very extensive. The density is also at a higher rate. Urbanization is a major cause of concern in the current time due to the following reasons. What are those reasons? Marginalized rural population invariably lives a nomadic life, constantly on the move in search of a better life. That is a common criteria wherever you see these nomadic lives. They used to search for a better standard of lives, and they used to move. They live as a workers in a rural areas, toiling in agricultural fields or performing menial jobs, etc., is going to take place. So such type of communities, such type of nomadic people, whoever going to come and they are going to stay for some a few months or few years and they will leave. So while coming to the another reason, upon arrival in urban cities, they are attracted to the luxuries and comforts, comfortable lifestyle, preferring to stay back and work as unskilled laborers in the organized as well as unorganized job sectors. This is the one of the most important points need to be considered. So, due to the comfort, flexibility in the cities, as I said now, when you are having accessibility and feasibility and comfort, generally people love to stay maximum possibly in that type of a zones only. So, as long as that zone is going to provide comfort, definitely they are not going to leave. This will also be one of the reason for urbanization. While coming to the another reason, slums in urban cities are major centers of crime. So lack of healthy environment contributes to vector-borne diseases that become the epicenter of epidemic. This is a very well-known point. So the crime rates in slum areas will also be very at a higher rates. When you look at the statistics indication the crime and the spreads of these so-called epidemics, they are indicating in slum areas, the strong indication of this crime and epidemics are possible in urban areas. And not only that, the drainage problems, especially the drainage systems, every drainage system will be designed with some factor of safety. Factor of safety in a sense, the capacity of a drainage for suppose say, if it is limited for 10,000 people, then the design obviously could be made for 12,000 or 15,000. If the people inmates of the surroundings is more than 20,000, then what happens? Obviously, the drainage system will be more, right? But the system will be same. It is designed only for 10,000. If the capacity increased, then what does it mean? The capacity of drain also should increase, but here we are not able to increase. So that is the main reason with the designed 10,000 drainage, 20,000 people are residing. So this is how the failure systems of drainages are taking place. And garbage, this is the most important and most popular factor. If you look at in the drainage systems, you can see a large garbage and a huge pollution due to that garbage. So the disposal of garbage will become a very big question to the authorities, to the municipalities. If you look at that, when you are dealing with garbage disposal, household or any other residential or industrial disposal, when you are coming to the disposal will be a big problem because of inefficient, inadequate staff. The disposal of the slum areas, the garbage in slum areas is going to be a big task for the authorities. So that is the reason where the vector-borne diseases are going to take place, and they are going to lead to several loss of lives. So now when you are dealing with the disposal of this and drainage systems and water system, water pipeline system also. When you are dealing with the water pipeline system, the same scenario you can apply. What is that? For suppose say if the pipeline is designed for 10,000 people, so the service of the water can be given to the 10,000 people. In that manner only the authorities will design and they will supply. But here what happens, the demand is more. That means instead of 10,000, 20,000 people are there. Only within the quantity of 10,000, 20,000 people should survive. Here it comes the factor that the scarcity of water. So with that, to overcome this, if we are going to drain the water from the ground more than the required, then what happens? Overdrain will takes place, which will leads to another disasters in the very near future. So these all are interlinked. So whenever we are going to consider this urbanization, it is a very much threat to the upcoming society communities. So it should be by means of authorities or by means of policies, we are supposed to restrict the communities till to some extent for the some area. That means for suppose say for 5,000 people, they are living over an area of 100 acres. So that should be, there should be some limit. Why? Because for that 5,000 people, the design will be made for whether it may be 5,000 or 7,000. So what is the design? The design in terms of a water supply, sewerage, and medical supply, education. These all are the parameters where we need to consider for any community, right? The most important is health and education, and the food supply. These all are the criteria. So when you are dealing with any community restriction of population, we need to understand that the supply quality of these services should be limited. Otherwise, if one teacher is there and thousands of students are there, then it is not going to give you a quality in education system. As well as when you are dealing with hospitality. So when you are dealing with about health criteria, currently what we are facing in this pandemic, it is the same. So in the hospitals, we are not having beds. That is why the patients are laying outside, and it is going to lead to another problems due to shortage of treatment. The people are losing their lives. So this is all because of a rapid urbanization. So in any of the authorities, any of the policies in the constitution, so they are supposed to restrict the communities and restrict the density of the people up to certain extent, in such a manner keeping in the view that the quality of education, health services, and all the other services associated with the living of that particular community should be sufficient, whether it may be drainage system or garbage disposal system or water supply system, any. So keeping all these parameters in mind, one can understand, one should understand that the quality of a living, the life standard of any of the community should be at a certain specifications. So if we are able to follow that, definitely healthy and prosperous society will be achieved by means of this. But nowadays, in this current scenario, it is a highly impossible task to lead the healthy and in a healthy environment. Why? Because neither we are not fit to have a good healthy environment, nor we are not going to create. So that is how we are struggling at these points. In this criteria, when we are dealing with disasters, we are obviously in a very danger zone by means of any of the disaster. So in this, in the second unit, we are geological disasters, hydrological trends in now. Okay, by means of with the discussion of this, we have completed this second unit, and from next class onwards, we are having another topic, miscellaneous topics from first unit, and after that again we are going to move to another topic, another unit. And now, till now, if you guys have any doubts in this, please, it is your time to ask question. So you please ask me if you have any doubts. Okay, guys, thank you very much. We will continue the class in the upcoming, we are having class on Saturday, right? Okay, all of you, by the next class, most probably, in the next class, we are, according to the university, they have given vacation from up to 1st of the 31st of this month. If that is circulated in our college, our class will not be there on Saturday. If not, we will be having class on Saturday. Okay, guys. Yeah, thank you very much. Be safe. Take care.
Sir, is that notice true, sir?
Which one?
That notice, PG notice. It
PG
is for late
notice.
graduates too.
Hmm.
The notice I have just sent you in WhatsApp, sir, the same notice. Is that true, or is it only for postgraduate students? We are UG students, right? And in the notice, it is written that it's only for PG, campus, constituent colleges, and district PG colleges. It is written as. So I'm asking for clarity.
Yeah, maybe.
Okay, sir.
Yeah, this is PG colleges only, no?
Let the I'll ask the HOD, sir.
Yeah, that is good. But according to the circular which we are looking at, you're right. That is PG colleges only.
Mm-hmm.
But summer vacation giving to only PG and not giving to other, it will not be there according to my knowledge. If they are declaring, that will be declared for all the institutes, right?
Understood, sir.
Yeah, okay, but you just contact HOD sir, then you will be get clarified.
Okay, sir. Thank you, sir.
Okay, take care, bye.
Sir, thanks for the webinar, sir. Most people have joined the webinar too. They have already watched. And when you stop the webinar, it will be there in the website. Students can review the lesson again.
Okay, ma, thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, take care.
Sir, attendance. Sir, चले गया. Sir, attendance, sir.
Attendance you posted, right?
Sir?
Just post in the chat box your roll number, that's all.
Okay, okay, sir.